Your brain on porn. I'm Dr. Trish Leigh. Let me explain to you the top effects that pornography has on your brain performance and how that rolls out into how it impacts you in your life in terms of your mental capacity, which includes cognition and psychological issues like mental health, your physical capacity, which is how it affects your body and your physiology, and then in your interpersonal or relationship capacity, which I call the ripple effect of devastation. And obviously, my opinion is skewed based on the science, but let's dig in because I am going to tell you, and I'm going to read some of the specifics to you, but I am going to tell you the 8 most devastating effects that pornography use has on your brain. And then, of course, I'm going to tell you what you can do about it. Okay, so number 1, your brain literally shrinks and has less activation. So, what that means is the science has shown that when you continue to go back for more pornography, it actually makes the size of your brain become smaller. And the only way to put it is that your brain is shrinking. And this was found in a 2014 study in the Journal of Medicine in the psychiatry version. And what they found is that there was smaller brain volume and fewer connections between the brain areas. That's the activation. So there was smaller brains and less activation for people who had a pornography habit or consumed pornography regularly. You don't want that to be you, right? Okay, moving on. That the brain was wired toward a more juvenile state. Now, the way that this happens is that the prefrontal cortex up in the front of your brain is the area for impulse control and judgment. It's also the area for executive function, which is planning and organization, being able to make big goals and then being able to take smaller action steps towards those goals and be able to stay the course, like I always say, and not have to have instant gratification. That prefrontal cortex was shown to be smaller and less active and was wired towards the way that it would be in younger people, because basically the prefrontal cortex is the most advanced area of the brain, and it develops in young women all the way until age 25 and young men to the age of 28. So basically it's arrested development. Your brain is stuck in that mode of when you were a teenager, which makes impulse control difficult, makes the compulsion of having to go back for more and more instant gratification for pleasure instead of joy. That area of your brain is acting too young. And we know from the science that the trauma that is at the core for many people in terms of the beginning and the development or growth of a pornography habit, the trauma is what can kind of arrest that development of the brain, and then the habit of it really seals that younger juvenile brain in. Again, you don't want that. You don't want a 12-year-old brain running your life, do you? Absolutely not. That's why I'm here. I want you to get that habit out of your way so that you can then have your brain develop fully, because a fully developed brain helps you reach your full potential. That is what we are doing here. Okay, so that prefrontal cortex that is eroding because of the habit ends up in more bad decisions, ends up in impulse control issues, and it makes your habit worse. Okay, so we know the science supports that. Number 3, moving on to some of the physiology, is sexual dysfunction. There's science that shows that the 2 main ways that sexual dysfunction is being seen in people who have a regular pornography consumption habit is erectile dysfunction, and we know now that they're calling it porn-induced erectile dysfunction because we have young men who have erectile dysfunction more so than 20 years ago that we found in older men. There's scientific studies that prove that. And so that's a devastating effect physically, because then what happens is it perpetuates the shame that's at the core of a pornography habits cycle, perpetuating that shame, making it more difficult for a man to be with his partner, making the dynamics throwing them off and creating and perpetuating the whole thing. Secondly is delayed ejaculation. And somebody asked me in one of the comments to make a video, and I haven't yet made a video completely on this concept, but the science supports that because the brain gets used to this massive hyperarousal that it needs to be able to feel pleasure, to be able to reach ejaculation. What happens is then when a man is with his partner, he's not able to do that because he's not drinking the Kool-Aid that he's getting from the screen. That massive neurochemical release that is what his brain now needs to be able to feel pleasure. And that's due to the habituation that happens from going back to the screen for more and more and more. And it ends up in the physiology creating sexual dysfunction. And we know that that's on the rise from the science. So then that falls out into number 4, which is marital quality for those who are married and for commitment to one's partner. We see that tanking due to pornography. And science proves this, that if you are going back to the screen and you're watching many, many different people, being with many, many different people in a way that's artificial and it's performance, it's not even an experience, what happens is then when partners go back and men go back to their partner, there's no way that they can desire them as much as what they've seen on the screen because it's not real. It's artificial. I'm telling you, like with some of the comments that people put, and I know those are the people who need these videos the most, I want to make a video where all I say is it's not real. Like it's just not real, and it's not showing real life and how healthy sexuality should fall out. And healthy sexuality can be fun and explorative, and it can include, lots of funky stuff if that's what you're into, but it's with another human being, not watching it on a screen of other people performing it that's not even real. So when you go back to your partner, it can't possibly live up to what you've seen, and the science supports that. So when you break that habit and you no longer go to the screen, guess what happens? Your partner becomes more desirable. And we know, again from the science, because that's what this video is about, that when a man desires his partner less, what happens because of pornography is the partner actually desires the man less, and then dynamics are all thrown off. Before you know it, nobody's having sex for a long time. There's no intimacy. You start seeing all the terrible stuff in your partner instead of all the good stuff that made you want to be with that person in the first place, and it becomes a slippery slope moving in the wrong direction. Another reason is because the acts that are performed in pornography are not ones that are mutually desirable or pleasurable for the most part. And that's the objectification of women, where in the scenes, men are doing things to women and using them as objects, and most times those acts are not things that women would actually enjoy in the world. So what happens to many couples when I talk with them is that a major reason that a wife may find out is because the husband tries to get the wife to do those things in the bedroom. And those aren't things that people would have fun doing together because they're fake scenes on the screen. So they're actually painful and harmful acts most of the time when it really degrades into intensity. That's not something that's going to happen in the real world, which means your brain can't get that heightened supernormal stimulus because those acts are fake. But it shows up in marriage and partnership quality, which deteriorates, which is a bummer for couples and a massive bummer for families. And that's why some of my colleagues in this area call pornography the silent family killer, because when there's addiction or compulsion in the family system, all of the relationships are thrown off between partners, between dads and children. And when there's addiction in the system, kids pick that up. And unfortunately, many times that can be perpetuated in the next generation, which is why we need to break the habit. Okay, so I've already kind of said this, but number 5 is that when you're watching pornography, sex is a performance, not an experience being experienced by two people for mutual engagement, for connection, and for joy instead of pleasure and pain reduction. And when you're watching pornography, you think you're learning how sex should be. That's why, going back to the comments, when people are like, if I just watch more porn, I'll learn more about how to have great sex. No, that's not true, because that is artificial. On the screen, there's very little of connection. It actually, science proves that it actually creates more isolation in the person watching it, not the desire to be more connected to their partner or the people in their world. So it doesn't create that. The more you watch doesn't create better sex in the bedroom. It creates worse. Science shows that. And it's because it's so skewed. And, people ask about, what about soft porn? Is that better? Honestly, it's probably better, but it still puts you as a party watching other people, which is not at all how sex is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an experience, not a performance consumed by another person, but at least it's probably showing more of what healthy sexuality should look like, instead of those really skewed versions as the intensity increases. Okay, number 6, we got 8 of them here. Number 6 is that what happens, a pornography habit creates the need or the desire or the habit of a person, an individual, turning towards technology for a sexual release instead of turning to human beings. And this is how pornography is really impacting the younger generation. It's also impacting the older generation, but in a new way for younger people, because younger people are watching more and more and more porn. And then that's just the way that their sexuality is developing. And that would be fine if that was healthy for them, but it's not. We know that it's melting their brains, shrinking it, and creating underactivity. So we're going to have a new generation in a couple years, 5, 10, 20 years of people who can't think as well as they should because of their pornography habits, because they're turning to technology for sex instead of turning to human beings. So when people say to me, I don't have a partner, what should I do? You should stop turning to the technology as your sexual release, because your brain is learning to do that. It's learning. That's what your sexuality is. That's the unwiring of the brain pattern of going back to the screen. But then looking for a partner or building connections of intimacy and having your brain get excited about the prospect of being with that person is healthy. So that's part of the reward center in the brain that becomes so skewed because of pornography. The reward center is basically it becomes faulty, so that your brain continues to want to desire the seeking out of the pornography. That's the fun part in actual healthy sexuality that becomes so distorted by pornography. So if you don't have a partner, get on the hunt for one, or connecting with other people and getting excited about the prospect of being with them instead of just turning to your technology. Okay, number 7, we know that pornography use increases shame. It's built on a shame cycle. So shame creates it in the first place, and shame is, I am not worthy. So I know a lot of people say, I don't feel that way. Many times you don't know you feel that way, and if it's not you, if I'm speaking and you're like, that's not me, then it might not be you. But for many people, it is. They have this anxiety in them. They don't know that it's shame, but it's this feeling that they're not good enough and that they don't compare to other people. And then what that creates is the need to go to the screen to feel desired and to feel in control and to feel wanted. But then when they go to the screen, it creates even more shame. And so, I would say you don't want to be that guy that has to turn to the screen to self-soothe or to get your sexuality. And then when you break free of it, you break free of guilt and shame, and you create dignity and integrity instead. And that is the way out, and that is how you reach your full potential, and it's totally, totally awesome. Okay, number 8, last one, is habituation. The last brain process that we're going to talk about in this video on your brain on porn is that we know from the science that going back to the screen over and over and over creates habituation. And what habituation means is that your brain will need more intensity and your brain will need more time. It will need more frequency. It will need more consistency. It will need more intensity just to feel the same as it did a year ago. And what happens for people is that ramps up slowly and you might not even feel yourself doing it. But I would challenge you in this here video to look at how often you were going back to porn a year or 2 or 3 ago, how often you're going now. If you're looking at porn at work, if you're just checking it out while you're in a cab being driven around town, if when you sit on the couch, you just check it out for 5 minutes here and there. If you find yourself dabbling into newer genres of more intensity, your brain is habituating. It needs more neurochemical release to get the same feelings that you did a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. And you might not even know it because the creators of the sites make it so seamless for you to be able to just ramp all of that up with ease. And I have a quote here from Norman Doidge, who has written 2 books on neuroplasticity. The Brain That Heals Itself is an awesome book. And he has written that pornography satisfies every one of the prerequisites for neuroplastic change. When pornographers boast that they are pushing the envelope by introducing new, harder themes, what they don't say is that they must, because their customers are building up a tolerance to the content. And that's what habituation is. And that's what that super normal stimulus is that it checks every single box to be an addictive behavior because it's changing the way that your brain is performing and making your brain go back for more and more. That is the compulsion to go back to satisfy the need that's no longer out of your control or no longer in your control. It's out of your control. So if you are looking for help to be able to get out of this cycle of all these neural mechanisms, I am here for you. Visit my website at drtrishleigh.com. There's a blog post on this video, and there's also a link to the science that proves that what I say is real. I'm going to tell you it right here. It's neurosciencenews.com. And then if you just look up neuroscience pornography brain, you'll find it. I am just the messenger. And you know what they say about the messenger? You can't shoot the messenger. Some people will try, but I'm just the messenger. So let's break this habit. Let's get your brain nice and healthy and juicy and flowing so you can reach your full potential. Okay, remember, control your brain or it'll control you.